All right, we are back on the Young Turks, and I want to talk to you about what I think was one of the most important pieces of legislation in a long, long time. That's the National Defense Authorization Act. Unfortunately, it was a disastrous piece of legislation, and we've talked about it many times here on the Young Turks. And some supporters of the president say, well, it was okay that he signed it because there was an exemption for United States citizens. Because what the bill does is it allows for indefinite detention without trial at the military's discretion. Now, one of the things that was changed was to allow the president to also have discretion. Ooh, still the executive branch. But the section that everybody points to is in 1022. It says the requirement to detain a person in military custody under this section does not extend to citizens of the United States. And people say, see, they put that into the bill. That means the U.S. citizens cannot be indefinitely detained. Unfortunately, that is totally wrong. You have to be well-versed in the way they write these things. It says the requirement to detain a person in military custody does not extend to citizens. In other words, it's an option that the president has and the military has. If the president wants to detain U.S. citizens, he can. In fact, President Obama, in his signing statement, acknowledged it. He says, again, this sounds good, but I'm going to tell you why it's bad. He says, I want to clarify that my administration will not authorize the indefinite military detention without trial of American citizens. Indeed, I believe that doing so would break with our most important traditions and values as a nation. He continues to say, my administration will interpret Section 1021 of the bill in a manner that ensures that any detention it authorizes complies with the Constitution, the laws of war, and all other applicable law. That sounds really good, right? Wrong again. No, it says, my administration will not authorize it. That is an acknowledgement that other administrations can. So he's saying, I'm choosing not to detain U.S. citizens indefinitely without a trial on my watch. Trust me, maybe. But future presidents can do anything they like. It's acknowledged in the signing statement. By the way, what the hell is President Obama doing a signing statement for? Remember what he said during the campaign? He said, I will not use signing statements to nullify or undermine congressional instructions as enacted into law. You know why? Signing statements are unconstitutional. You don't get to say, hey, you know what? The legislature passed the law this way. I signed it, but I won't do some of the parts I don't like. That's not how our system works. So civil libertarians are not just disappointed, they're outraged by this. This is not just my interpretation or some law professor's interpretation. It is the consensus among lawyers that care about this issue that this is the case. For example, Amnesty International says, once any government has the authority to hold people indefinitely, the risk is that it can be almost impossible to rein such power in. President Obama has failed to take the one action, a veto, that would have blocked the dangerous provisions in the NDAA. In so doing, he has allowed human rights to be further undermined and given al-Qaeda a propaganda victory. Now, that is very tough talk, but it's true. Why are we letting al-Qaeda dictate the way we run this country and undermining our constitutional rights? It's an outrage. The ACLU agrees. They say President Obama's actions today is a blight on his legacy because he will forever be known as the president who signed indefinite detention without charge or trial into law. That's Anthony Romero, Executive Director of the ACLU. Now I want to welcome in Hina Shamsi, who is also with the American Civil Liberties Union, to talk about this issue. Thank you so much for joining us. And I want to just start out by saying, look, obviously strong statements by your executive director. Jonathan Turley, law professor, says this can't be undone. This is hideous. One of the worst pieces of legislation he's ever seen. I mean, it could, of course, be undone by other legislation, but not by a signing statement that says, I probably won't do it. So are we overreacting here, or is it as bad as it looks?
Well, we're not overreacting, but I think we want a little bit of clarity here. It is true that there is a provision in there, 1022, as you pointed out, that mandates military detention or creates a presumption of military detention for certain categories of people, mainly foreign al-Qaeda suspects, including possibly foreign suspects captured in the United States. There's another provision, 1021, which is the broader military detention provision, and we believe that that provision does not authorize the detention of U.S. citizens captured in the United States or legal permanent residents captured in the United States. The issue, though, is that the Bush administration used very similar authority and language, which 1021 purports to incorporate, to argue argue that it could hold an American citizen captured in Chicago, a U.S. permanent resident picked up in Peoria, indefinitely without charge or trial. And so the danger is not just what this administration says, and President Obama has said that he's not going to use these provisions against American citizens, although he's pointedly not said anything about legal permanent residents or foreign residents, but what a future president can do. And you know, Cenk, I think that our concern should be obviously for U.S. citizens, but it should be broader. It is also about the rule of law and due process and the message that America sends to her enemies and her allies when it says we're committing ourselves down a path that violates our democratic values, that falls foul of what our founders promised in the Fifth Amendment, which is that all people are entitled to due process of law before they're deprived of their liberty. And we're heading in a direction that gives comfort to our enemies and alienates our allies.
So I want to ask you specifically about the Jose Padilla case. Remember, of course, everybody, well, you remember, I don't know if everybody does, that Jose Padilla was a U.S. citizen that was held in the United States without trial for a number of years, which I thought was the most outrageous thing that had ever happened. The rest of the media seemed to go along with it, like, yeah, sure, of course, why not arrest U.S. citizens and not give them a trial? So does this legislation allow future presidents to be able to do the same thing, but now under the cover of law?
We believe that it does not because it doesn't specifically say so. And the reason for that is that when Congress purports to deprive Americans of fundamental rights, and what right could be more fundamental than the right to liberty, then it has to clearly say so. And in this legislation, Congress does not clearly say so. And I think that's in large part because of an amendment introduced by Senator Feinstein towards the latter part of the congressional debate, in part because there was such an outcry amongst grassroots people, not just on the left, but also on the right, about the prospect of this indefinite military detention of U.S. citizens. So we don't think it's authorized, but again, the Bush administration used similar language, and certainly there are those who argue that the law is unclear. The Supreme Court did not rule in the Jose Padilla case. The Supreme Court didn't rule in the case of Ali Al-Mari. And so the concern remains that because this legislation has been passed, that it could be used against American citizens and others.
Yeah, to me, it reads that they have the option to be able to do it. If they ever do it and you guys are going to go to court and say, look, you shouldn't do it because of this law, because it's vague, because it has to say, hey, we have the option to do it. In another part, it says we're not changing the law. They did it purposely murky, the Feinstein Amendment that you're talking about. Then Godspeed in doing that in court and trying to fight for people who are detained. But the way I read it, it says that the president has the option to do it, and I think it's an absolute disaster.
Well, Cenk, I think that the reality here is that it's a disaster, yes, because it is codifying, big picture, right? Let's step back. It's codifying indefinite military detention without charge or trial for people captured far from any battlefield as part of American law for the first time in American history. And that is why this is a huge step backwards for civil liberties and why it in fact does not, as I said before, make us more safe, because it essentially militarizes our counterterrorism policy even when law enforcement and our federal courts are the proven better alternative.
All right. Hina Shamsi is the director of the ACLU's National Security Project. Thank you so much for joining us on the Young Turks. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And by the way, the law also does not allow you to bring back detainees from Guantanamo into the United States. It's got so many terrible provisions. So this actually leads into our first ever Media Watch. So we're going to focus on CNN here. The National Defense Authorization Act is something that has been considered for weeks and, in fact, months at this point. It has been debated. The president threatened to veto, and then he decided not to veto it. Senator Levin said he introduced some of the provisions that wound up being the most noxious, including the possible detention of U.S. citizens. We have covered it many times on this show. Yet we were surprised to find out that the establishment media is not covering it very much at all. In fact, in this entire process, as they considered the law, they debated the law, the president issued a veto threat, and then he did not veto it. He signed it into legislation. Throughout all of that, the so-called most trusted name in news, CNN, covered this story 0 times in prime time. Not one story in prime time. Overall, they do 24 hours of news. In those months, they've mentioned it just 5 times. In 3 of the instances, it was in under 30-second mentions. Oh, by the way, the National Defense Authorization Act might take away your rights. Okay, let's move on. And in fact, they weren't even clear on that. Now, to be fair, there was one excellent interview that Natalie Ellen did with Jonathan Turley, who's a constitutional law professor that cares deeply about this. Credit where credit is due. That was nicely done. The other interview was with a law professor who seemed to be in favor of the bill. I don't know how they found a law professor in favor of this bill in the country, but leave it to CNN to give you that kind of nonsense balance. Well, almost all the civil libertarians believe that it's an atrocious bill, including the ACLU, Amnesty International, etc., but we found one guy that seems to agree with it. That's CNN's balance for you. The other 3 times, they barely mentioned it. In fact, one of the times they mentioned it, they got it totally wrong. Watch what Don Lemon says here.
The legislation includes a controversial national security waiver that allows the president to transfer a detainee from a military prison like Guantanamo Bay to civilian custody if he chooses.
That is not true. The opposite is true. The president cannot transfer detainees from Guantanamo Bay into the United States. Way to be the most trusted name in news. But I'm less bothered that they happen to get that story wrong. I guess they're so indifferent to the story that they didn't even bother getting that right. They're like, oh, who cares? Our civil liberties are being taken away. Just mention it in passing in like 15 seconds or so. I'm bothered that they don't cover it overall. Please stop with the weebles and do real news. All right, when we come back.
Shalom, all praise and honor and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakah Kadash. Double honors to the apostles, double honors to the elders of Great Millstone. Salutations to you, welcome to the teaching of truth and sincerity across the 4 corners of the earth. This is a lesson going into how they're going to come down with great wrath. And we're going to be put in prisons, some of us, for righteousness' sake. But, Jake, that hasn't listened to this truth, they're going to go inside these prison detentions too as well, but they should not get the reward of the righteous. And I just want to point out in this this agenda booklet of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, showing that it's going into blacklisting different so-called extremist groups. And one of them I seen that points out clearly that the government is watching us as black Hebrew Israelites, which we're not black, but they know that we out here speaking against this wicked society that they benefit from. They have set their laws and policies and orders to combat us and ultimately try to get rid of us. The Heavenly Father has them in a trick bag, and the Most High is going to deliver us from the grips of our enemies that shoot at us in private. It says right here, executive summary. I'm going to read down in this paragraph. It says, however, the upcoming millennium also holds important implications beyond the issue of computer technology. Many extremist individuals and groups place some significance on the next millennium, and as such, it will present challenges to law enforcement at many levels. The significance is based primarily upon the either religious beliefs relating to the apocalypse, because we're preaching about the downfall of this place, which in other terms is the apocalypse, or political beliefs related to the New World Order conspiracy theory. And we talks about, we always mention Esau and his New World Order agenda, which it is playing out. The challenge is how well law enforcement will prepare and respond. And that's what they're doing right now. This is an article from 2018. It says, new bipartisan bill could give any president the power to imprison U.S. citizens in military detention forever. The Lord's going to give Esau, the devil, that power, because he's going to come down with great wrath to mandate or have the people in submission to mandatory restrictions. And if you don't be in line with the mandatory restrictions of the shadow government, then you're going to be destroyed. And the Lord gave Esau that power, but the Lord's going to set up a standard with the chosen ones of Israel. One of the most outrageous acts of Barack Obama presidency, which you jakes out there voted for, shows you that this Hamite is not your people, and he did not have you jakes' best interests in mind. He only had the elite banking family best interests in mind. This is all according to the Project Megiddo too. One of the most outrageous acts of Barack Obama presidency was his failure to veto the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2012. The fiscal year 2012 NDAA included provisions that appeared to both codify and expand a power the executive branch had previously claimed to possess, namely the power to hold individuals in your possessions too, which you bought and paid for. You got the title and deeds to it. They can confiscate it in a time of national emergency or state of emergency, which we're in a continuation of the national emergency due to the shutdown, the government shutdown a couple of years ago, and also a state of emergency with this pandemic. So we in that state now, and they're just moving forward to the point that they have the troops patrolling the streets, and there's no more 911 police departments that you can call, and these different courts where you can go and have due process of the matter of whatever case that you may have with the law enforcement. No, they're going to just hold you indefinitely, and you're not going to have no attorney, no lawyer to combat the system in your favor. Look at the court systems now. Everybody has to go virtue to attend courts or to attend a court summit due to a pandemic. It goes to show you that all this time with the pandemic, the elite has been or has already prepared to reset everything, including the judicial system. Goes to show you that they are initiating the New World Order, namely the power to hold individuals, including U.S. citizens, in military detention indefinitely based on the authorization to use military force passed by Congress 3 days after 9/11. The New York Times warned that the bill could give future presidents the authority to throw American citizens into prison for life without charges or a trial. Not surprisingly, Obama's decision generated enormous outcry across the political spectrum, from Republican Ron Paul, representative of Texas on the right, to Senate Bernie Sanders on the left, which they all are one body anyway. However, the NDAA did provide some weak restraints on the executive branch's ability to use this power. In theory, the NDAA provisions only apply to someone involved with the 9/11 attacks or substantially supported Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, or associated forces, which I mentioned in Project Megiddo. They call us extremists, us extremist groups, so-called Black Hebrew Israelites and other extremist groups as well, mainly the Hebrew Israelites. We're talking about the apocalypse of America. We're talking about the New World Order agenda being initiated through these legislations that they have passed in order to appease the New World Order elites. So this is not about coincidence. This is not something that's just made up. They have their plan already intact, and it's manifesting itself clearly day in and day out. Especially with the lockdown. They just had everybody to stay in the house and receive stimulus checks. And now all of a sudden, those that didn't have the qualifications to sign up to receive the stimulus checks in the right way, whether they were unemployed or whether they were signing a PPP loan, the government is locking up those people that the system allowed them to sign up to receive those funds, but it wasn't valid on the back end. So the solution to the lockdown, to help everybody that was desperately in need, that was once working or may own the business or benefited off certain government programs, it really backfired on the people in general, even though some of those people was just scam artists. But at the same time, it put a stain on people actually receiving help in that manner. To now, the next wave of the stimulus or help from the government wants all the details about you, to the point that in order for the government to give you anything, it's going to be mandatory that you take the mark of the beast, which is the RFID chip, which the Lord told us not to take. Like it says in Revelation chapter 13, verse 16. Matter of fact, I'm going to get it. This is where we're headed. This is Revelation chapter 13, verse 16. And he calls it all. How is Esau causing the world to receive that mark? By taking away people's possession. You know, all these laws and legislations that Esau has on paper is really against you people, especially you Jakes. You know, that's why when shit hit the fan or when things hit the wire, the government has your consent to do those things that the government or the shadow government wants to do to you, by way of putting you in prison indefinitely because you signed your life away when you voted for these presidents, when you voted, period. You know, that's why they fund these different voting programs with your favorite celebrities being the face of it, so that they can manipulate you into really signing your life away by voting these different officials into office. What you really don't understand is that you're giving power to the government to do whatever to you, to take over your life, to rule you as a god. And that's how he did it. Both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their forehead. Who you gonna tell? Who you gonna tell the you gonna tell the Prince of Saudi Arabia? You gonna tell the Prime Minister of the UK that the government of the United States is putting me in prison indefinitely without me even having to do anything? You know, they've read my thoughts through my Mark of the Beast chip, and now they're coming to get me. You know, like Minority Report. Tom Cruise arrested he arrested a man for premeditating a murder on his wife for cheating on him, but he never committed the crime. But they had the technology to read his thoughts, and that's what's happening right now. It says, and he calls it all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. He's going to cause you. It's going to be mandatory. And that no man might buy or sell. You ain't going to be able to buy or sell without that, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Now let's look back right here. Going back up. It says, however, the NDAA provide. Now let me go back up. It says right here, the fiscal year 2012 NDAA included provisions that appeared to both codify and expand a power the executive branch had previously claimed to possess, namely the power to hold individuals. Thanks to you people out there, especially you Jakes, you consented with the government to have rule or claim over your lives, to the point that if the government thinks that you are a domestic terrorist, whether you're not paying your child support, whether you are sending out so-called misinformation, which is the truth about the dangers of the society, whether it be America, UK, or any developed country that doesn't allow the truth on the internet, you're going to be deemed a terrorist, and they're going to have rights over you. Now, the men of the Lord, including the sisters, mainly the men, because the Most High flock is of men, the sons of Israel, which he told to go out and be a watchtower of Israel, to declare the truth to Israel. We don't participate in the vote and stuff like that, but at the same time, Esau has the power to come and get us too as well, because we are still in his possession. But the Most High is coming to redeem us from this enemy. It says, namely the powers to hold individuals, including U.S. citizens, in military detention indefinitely, based on the authorization to use military force passed by Congress 3 days after 9/11. Now, in the article I read 3 weeks ago about Atlanta making a decision on whether they should use the force of national troops to patrol the city, because the crime rate or the civil unrest has gotten extremely out of hand. You know, they are going to do that. They have the power to do that, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen, man. Day after day, crime is increasing in the cities. But this is all the doings of the Most High. This is 2nd Ezra chapter 15, verse 15. For the sword and their destruction draw nigh, and one people should stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. Yeah, they fighting against the law enforcement, the authorities. And it's going to get to the point to where martial law is initiated upon the people, and it's going to be a draconian law out here. It's not going to be you fought against your wife and, you know, the police may be involved and you get a police report, you got to report to court and all that. No, you get into a fight with your wife, or hell, it probably be something small as you not paying your fare at the train station and sneaking in the train station. They just haul you off to jail and you in there indefinitely for something that small. It's going to be such a draconian way of living in America really, really soon. You know, and one of the draconian laws that just happened is everybody wearing a mask. You're not allowed in restaurants or public places with other people, social distancing, and ultimately you staying in your house and not having a job. You know, they took the jobs away. And now they're giving it all back, but they're not giving it all back for your entrance to have everything back to normal. They're giving it back with restrictions. With those restrictions, if you don't abide by the restrictions of the government, you are going to be thrown away like trash. Because the elite have already counted the cost to initiate the New World Order, and nothing is going to stand in their way. For the sword and their destruction draw nigh, and one people should stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. It's happening right now. That's why the law enforcement are going hard through the streets of America. You know, even the police departments is geared up in military gear. For there should be sedition among men, and it is a separation among men, and invading one another, they should not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. A man should desire to go into a city and should not be able. For because of their pride, the cities shall be troubled, the houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid. They're going to lock you up indefinitely. How much more of them going into your house, taking you out of your homes, or separating you from your families? That's going to happen. This is Revelation chapter 2, verse 10. Fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. So we shouldn't fear them trying to lock us up indefinitely, because it is not going to be indefinitely. The Most High said, as soon as these things happen, the Lord is going to set up a standard for us. Then shall it be known who are his chosen. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that ye may be tried, and ye shall have tribulation 10 days. Yeah, we're going to be cast into these prisons, these indefinite military detention centers. But at the same time, the Most High is going to deliver us. They're going to force their chip on us in these camps too. But the elect will shun or reject the chip and abides in the ways of the Most High until the Most High delivers us. And ye shall have tribulation 10 days. We're going to have tribulation for a time. Be thou faithful unto death. And that's what we all should be meditating on is being faithful in the hope that is stored up for us, or has been stored up for us from the beginning. And that we're going to reap those things because we gave our life over to the Most High and His Son. And I will give thee a crown of life. See, Yahweh Shai is going to give us a crown of life, like it says in 2 Ezra chapter 2. So that was it. That's all I had. Just wanted to point this out. Esau, the so-called white man, Satan himself, Satan and a counterpartner, which is the so-called white man, is coming down with great wrath. But the Lord said, be faithful until the end, so we can obtain the reward from the Heavenly Father for combating evil and going through the straight gate. So with that, I want to give all praise and honor, glory to Yahweh Shem Shah, the elect. Shalom.